on the wall some distance across from you, you might use that for pictures or weather.
Yeah.
But if you walk up to it, your interface with that has changed.
Yeah.
It should know that you want to use it now.
Yeah, or where you are. And so, and what's interesting is that there's these. It's like in the earlier days, and there still are these satellites. And it's called remote sensing, where they sense the ecosystem of the Earth and tell us about water, heat, forest fires, all this sort of stuff, pollution. The transducers that we have today are much closer. It's the same thing, though. It's what I call proximal sensing. It's a little bit like what the buzzwords are, things like sensor networks and so on and so forth, and ambient intelligence. But the real thing is that the cameras, the microphones, and other things. So just if you think about this wall-size display, think about something like Natal, which is being developed for video games, being that type of technology being there, so it knows how close I am, knows I'm approaching. Mm-hmm. When I'm away, I can gesture with my hands, so when I come up, it realizes I'm right there, and so it switches over to sense my touch. And also the fonts maybe get bigger as I get closer. Smaller as I get closer, and bigger as I depart. And is there one person or two? And I'm not trying to make these things be like artificial intelligence and sort of stuff in the sense. I just want them to be consistent with my expectations.
It should be smart enough, though, that it knows, well, Natal will know each user.
Yeah.
So if I have a different eyesight, maybe my fonts are bigger at a distance than someone younger than me.
Right. But what I need to say about this and all of this, and so our repertoire, we're just like painters, we can paint these technologies, we can paint different visions of the future. We should always use the word future in the plural because there's more than one possible future. Which one do we choose? And if we enumerate the others, we can make maybe more intelligent choices. But the principal thing is, voice, gesture, touch does not necessarily natural user interface make. And I'll give you one example. Let's take speech. Make something I can just talk to my computer, get everything happening. If you're driving a vehicle and you're using any digital device that is not 100% eyes-free and hands-free and absolutely minimal cognition-free, so that you have absolutely minimal distraction from your primary task of driving, which probably means something that's completely speech operated. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that, you should be arrested. I don't want my kids playing on the street with you driving.
Yeah.
And that's going to be legislated across all the jurisdictions going forward. So it is absolutely clear that for that task, if you are going to use it, and to the extent that it can be done safely, this is the natural and the correct way. And it's natural in the sense that it exploits skills that we have acquired through a lifetime of living in the world.
Yeah.
Which minimizes the cognitive load and therefore minimizes the distraction. So it's more like speaking to you when you're on the seat beside me in the car where my phone's sitting. Take exactly the same phone. Exactly the same thing I'm talking about in terms of a memo or a thought or something like that. And now I'm sitting in an airplane flying into San Jose Airport. And the thing I was talking about was the technical specifications of Natal. Using that same interface that I should be locked up in jail if I don't use in the car, I should be fired for using it in the plane because the person beside me is from a competitor and around me, right? And so the notion that speech, you can't say that something's best and just the thing or this is that without specifying the context.
Yeah, you have a saying, everything is best for something and worse for something.
That's exactly right. And then the good designer understands what, why, and for whom, and when, and what are the boundaries. And when somebody comes up and proposes an idea, a new technology, a new device, a new kind of gesture, and so on and so forth for me, and they can give me really articulate really well all the great things that can be done, why it's the right thing to do. If they can't tell me with the same fluency what's wrong with it when it won't work, then I'm going to ask them to, let's dive into this conversation about until you can do both.
Yeah.
You haven't done your homework.
Yeah.
It's not ready. It's a good idea maybe. I'm not saying you're right or wrong, but we don't understand it yet. And then we can start to make more intelligent decisions. So since we have some of these things we carry with us, and there's these things embedded, and they need to adapt to our purpose, one size does not fit all. And so what we need is a palette so that with that same mobile device or portable or slate or whatever, that I can adapt to it seamlessly in a way that doesn't add more complexity, in a way that's appropriate for the context and the task and where. It's just like when you and I are talking. Sometimes if we're in a restaurant or something, we're going to speak quietly. Other times I'm just going to use hand gestures, and we can switch, right? And sometimes I'm going to pass you a note. And I could do all of those things in the same meeting, depending on the message.
So we might be in a meeting together, and I want to
go,
pass you a note that no one else sees, and use some interface for
Or you
that.
might speak to me out loud, or you might do that. And you realize that, there's all these different channels. And if you don't have them all there, in that case, you're in the same context, but there's a different meaning or type of message. But there's other contexts. But that plurality of finding the appropriate, in some sense, maybe that's the better term, is the appropriate user interface.
Yeah.
Because it implies the sense of context. But if we don't have that, the conversation's broken. The natural part of it is, it's natural that we converse in the appropriate way. And then, how do we support the richness of that? And that's why, actually, at Microsoft Research, we have, there's a group, one of my favorite groups in Cambridge, England, that I work with the most. You got a bunch of, high-end engineer researchers and so on, but the managers are sociologists and a cognitive psychologist. And there's ethnographers and designers in there. And we have these sort of wacko, heterogeneous, we talk about heterogeneous computer networks, but I gotta tell you, heterogeneous social networks are way cooler.
Yeah.
Because you get these collections of people. And so, the Renaissance is over. There's no such thing as, the world's too complex for any single person to know everything. But, the king's dead, long live the king. The Renaissance is over, long live the Renaissance. Renaissance team. And that's one of the things that's most interesting about where we are, is that we have one of the only places in the world where you have these really interesting collections of people, of skills, that bring these really diverse backgrounds and perspectives to addressing these problems. So I think we've got a chance of getting it right. And man, if we do, just think what the consequences are.
So one of the futures that I expect you might see is that we will kind of flow between the traditional GUI and the more natural user interfaces, kind of like we go from a computer to getting on a phone back to a computer. So you're moving between these different types of interfaces? Okay,
so let's deconstruct that because that's a really nice question, and it really helps explain it. I would argue that if I'm writing, I write a column for Business Week just on design and innovation. Okay, if I'm doing that, I think the GUI is the natural interface.
Yeah.
Right? For that thing. It's just not the natural thing for me when I'm in my car.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And so so what we've had in the past is for some things what we've been doing have already. I'm not one of these people who says I want to get rid of the keyboard and the mouse and Windows. I think there is a place, and that the new things don't replace, and we always view things in a competitive sense. But if you think about it, cinema didn't replace live theater.
Yeah.
Television didn't replace cinema. Games didn't replace television, and videotapes and other things, DVDs and so on, didn't replace that. They all have their niche.
Yeah.
And radio still exists. And so it's a question, though, you refine and get to a finer granularity of covering the space so that and we start to understand in the McLuhan-esque sense that the medium's the message, but each medium has its own attributes and properties.
Yeah.
And then as we get more literate and understanding this world that's emerging, we become, literacy sort of means knowing what's the right tool. It's sort of like the difference between, we've got a screwdriver and a hammer. Now refining sort of slot head screwdrivers to different sizes. And then we've got Phillips and Robertson and all these, and hex screwdrivers and stuff like that. And somebody who's, right, and so we start, and I'm not trying to say we want to have this, we populate the space with this, humongous mess of stuff.
Yeah.
What it is that, what is the critical thing with design is, what's the minimal subset that gives us the best coverage? What's the best compromise? Because the thing about computers is that you don't need a gazillion different screwdrivers, because they can morph. And so you can have a reason, so you don't have to live like you're in a percussion studio. You have this minimal set, but of things that just flow and blend. And where you get the power is through the combinatorics. And this comes back that when I walk up here, pretend I wanted to show you something. Why would I show it to you I've got my mobile phone. In fact, I have it in my pocket, so I pull it out. But why would I show it to you on this little screen when I could just go point it there, do a gesture, bingo, and then up it comes, and then I can use touch here, as I would use the touchpad on my laptop
Yeah.
and pretend that's a screen. We could have that kind
would
of
be very
function,
cool.
right? And I walk away, and by the way, you stay, well, within Microsoft, you realize that means the networking people have some really hard work to do.
Yes,
that means the
definitely.
security people have some really hard work to do.
Yeah, it's
So
a handshake with any screen that you walk
and,
up to.
and in a secure way that stuff's not been ripped off and cookies
Yeah.
aren't being loaded and stuff like that. And you realize that you think about it at the surface, that this NUI stuff just affects the UX, user experience people.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, there's not a part of this company that doesn't have to be on point and
Yeah.
in focus towards a stand, because there's this really interesting engineering infrastructure. And so, there's a reason I have a graduate degree in computer science as well as music, because you need to know this technical stuff as well as the designer.
Yeah.
What's visible is sort of the artsy-fartsy, I'm not dressed in black, but, let's pretend I am,
Yeah.
type of the design side. But there's hardcore engineering that has to be done here. And again, that's why this is a great place to do it. But if we get it right, the critical thing is the tail of technology should not be wagging the dog of the human in society.
Absolutely, yeah.
But if you want, I think about the technology as a prosthesis. And you have to be a really good engineer to make a good prosthetic, but you also have to know about the person, whether it's a social prosthetic. That's what social computing is in a sense. It extends our ability beyond a motor sensory prosthetic, like an input device, or a cognitive prosthetic, which is things that are systems that start to react and do reasonable things. Get that all right, we got a good future.
So I think one of the things that the average consumer wouldn't have really gotten about Microsoft is that, especially with Natal, we have NUI baked into almost all of our major products. I mean, we have multi-touch in Windows 7, we have the Forward Sync, we'll have Natal. There's a lot of this is already into our products. So where people might think that it's new, it's been going on for a long time. We've always had speech in the tablet PC and a lot of other NUI things that are just really starting to be a big part of our software.
So the first thing is things don't happen generally in a big bang, where you just turn a switch and it comes. And it's a little bit like your kids. If you don't mark their heights on the kitchen cupboard door, you don't notice how much they've developed and changed in the last year, right? So you have to
until one day their eye
index it,
level
right?
would
And all
be
of a sudden you say, holy cow,
what happened?
That was last year, this is year. You write the date every time on their birthday or something like that. Example, in some sense you could say that the tablet PC, in retrospect, was our first offering in Surface computing, right? Now, and we realize these, and it's often you have to be down the path a bit before you start to see the patterns and the trends that are, and the convergences. So we look on other things. For me, let's take an example of multi-touch. It started off on Surface, and then it migrates over to Win 7. And then last year, we had this wonderful thing where all of a sudden it starts getting support in Silverlight. And so even on thin clients working on the cloud. So you start to be able to, as we start to populate the space, the pattern, and by the way, recognize that took how many different parts of the company, MSRs, where the multi-touch started, and company, and then you go into the Surface group, you go into the Windows group, you go into Live Labs, which had brought some of the stuff, and the .NET team and Expression Blend, and all these different groups, that's different divisions of the company, different presidents in many cases. What seemed like a bunch of discrete products, all of a sudden, oh, there's a pattern there. There actually is a strategy. There actually is a plan. It actually is executing, and